Welcome. If you've made it this far, you're probably experiencing or trying to understand a silent but profoundly significant moment. The day certain people simply stopped being missed. There was no fight, no dramatic goodbye, just an internal distancing, almost imperceptible, that raises an uncomfortable question: what changed in me? Throughout this video, we will analyze this phenomenon through the lens of human behavior psychology, engaging with ideas attributed to Carl Jung to understand why emotional absence is not always coldness, but a sign of psychic reorganization, personality maturation, and a shift in internal priorities. Here, you will recognize patterns, identify little discussed psychological traits, and understand how loneliness, when properly interpreted, ceases to be a loss and becomes an indicator of transformation. Stay until the end, because what will be revealed may change the way you interpret your relationships, and above all, the relationship you have with yourself. Before we move on, a quick request, and I promise not to break the rhythm. If this topic resonates with something you've experienced, if these ideas make sense to you in silence, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps this content reach more people who are also trying to understand their own behavior. Now, let's continue. The strange relief when someone disappears from your mind. There's a specific moment when you realize you no longer miss certain people. It's not anger, it's not active resentment. It's almost an inner silence. Carl Jung observed that as the psyche matures, it begins to withdraw energy from bonds that no longer resonate with who we are becoming. And this doesn't happen dramatically. It happens on an ordinary day, while you go about your routine and you realize you no longer think about that person as you used to. The curious thing is that along with this distancing comes a certain relief, and soon after, guilt. As if something were wrong with not feeling nostalgic. But what if this not feeling is a sign that your personality is reorganizing priorities? What if the absence of longing isn't coldness, but a silent internal adjustment? Jung said that what doesn't accompany our individuation ends up being left behind, even if it was once essential. And that's where the question that almost no one asks arises. What exactly changed inside you so that this person stopped occupying emotional space? This answer begins to appear when you observe not the person who left, but the self that remained. And that's what leads us to the next point. There's a type of change that almost no one notices when it happens, because it doesn't make a sound. It doesn't come with arguments. It doesn't come with blockages. It doesn't come with farewells. One day you wake up, follow your routine, solve your problems, and only at the end of the day do you notice something strange. That person didn't cross your mind at any point. It didn't hurt. You didn't miss them. And this, curiously, bothers you more than longing. Many people describe this feeling as coldness, but psychologically, it usually points to something else. Carl Jung observed that the human mind saves energy when something ceases to have an emotional function. It's like an app that runs in the background for years, draining the battery until the system decides to shut it down without warning. You don't feel immediate relief, you feel strangeness. Because we were taught that missing someone is proof of affection, and when that disappears, the doubt arises. Is there something wrong with me? But look at the detail that almost no one notices. This absence is usually accompanied by more clarity, more focus, less social anxiety. You start to notice the silence, and it doesn't weigh as heavily as before. Some relationships existed more out of habit than real connection, more because of who you were than who you are becoming. And when this realization hits, it doesn't come as a ready-made answer. It comes as a silent restlessness, one of those that keeps hammering inside, asking you to look less at who left and more at the space that remains. Because it is in this space that something important begins to reorganize itself. When loneliness stops hurting and starts revealing something, many people associate loneliness with loss, abandonment, or social failure. But from a psychological point of view, there is a type of loneliness that doesn't hurt. It clarifies. Jung spoke about confronting one's own shadow, that process in which a person gets to know themselves without the constant distraction of others. Fewer explanations, less effort to please, less need for artificial belonging. And that's scary because we've been taught that needing people less is a sign of isolation. But what if it's the opposite? What if it's precisely here that personality begins to take shape? The detail is that this process doesn't happen in isolation. It alters habits, choices, and even the way you emotionally connect from now on. And that's where the next point comes in, perhaps the most uncomfortable of all. After you realize that you no longer miss someone, the second part of the process begins, and this one is even stranger. Loneliness appears, but it doesn't arrive screaming. It sits beside you in ordinary moments, on the way home, in a lonely cafe, on a Sunday with no plans. And the most disconcerting thing is that it doesn't hurt like before. There's no tightness in your chest, no urgency to text someone just to avoid being alone. On the contrary, there's a different kind of silence there, almost comfortable, but which provokes an uncomfortable question. Since when did being alone become bearable? Jung said that when a person begins to get closer to who they really are, the external noise loses its power, and this changes the relationship with loneliness. Before, it seemed like a void to be filled. Now it begins to seem like a space where you can breathe better. You notice this when you no longer feel the need to explain your life all the time, when your cell phone is quiet and this doesn't generate immediate anxiety, when the presence of certain people becomes more tiring than their absence. It's not isolation, it's emotional selectivity. Your social behavior changes without you planning it. Less tolerance for shallow conversations, less patience for relationships of convenience, less effort to fit in. And that's scary, because society associates being comfortable alone with coldness or detachment. But in practice, what happens is something else. You begin to realize that many connections functioned as emotional crutches. When they fall, you're left. And in that encounter, without distraction, without an audience, a silent clarity emerges about who you are when no one is watching. And this clarity, without fanfare, begins to reorganize everything around you. The invisible pattern that repeats itself in your relationships. When someone ceases to be missed, it's rarely a one-off event. It's usually part of a pattern that repeats itself throughout life. Jung observed that we tend to relate based on internal archetypes, repeating dynamics until something within us awakens. And when that awakening happens, certain connections simply can no longer be sustained. You begin to realize that many relationships were based on older versions of yourself. More needy, more insecure, more dependent on validation. As these traits weaken, the relationships associated with them also lose strength. And this generates a profound estrangement because you still recognize the person, but you no longer recognize yourself in that role. The bond doesn't officially end, but it loses its psychological function. And here, a dangerous loop emerges, trying to recapture old feelings just to maintain an identity that no longer exists. The point is that while you try to understand why you stopped missing others, you may not yet have realized the impact this has on how you relate to yourself. And this detail completely changes the meaning of everything that came before. There comes a point when you start noticing a strange pattern in your relationships, as if they all follow an invisible script. Different people, different stories, but the end result is similar. At some point, you stop missing them. And it's not because they were all bad, nor because you've started rejecting connections. What changes is the place you occupy within these relationships. Jung said that we don't connect only with people, but with internal images, versions of ourselves that crave validation, acceptance, belonging. When these versions weaken, the bonds attached to them also lose strength. That's why you still respect certain people, but can no longer sustain the closeness. You notice this in simple details. You take longer to respond to messages. You avoid meetings that used to excite you. You feel a hard-to-explain tiredness after interactions that were once light. It's not gratuitous disinterest, it's emotional incompatibility. Many relationships stay alive because they reinforce who we were, not who we are becoming now. And when this difference becomes clear, trying to force the connection becomes a silent drain. The lesson here is not to distance yourself from everyone, but to recognize that repeating old bonds can be a way of avoiding internal changes. When you understand this pattern, something closes inside, not coldly but coherently, and this coherence changes the way you choose to be with others, because now the criterion is no longer to fill voids, but to respect the space that you have finally learned to sustain. In the end, when you put all the pieces together, the day someone stopped being missed, the silence that stopped bothering you, the patterns that began to repeat themselves, a conclusion emerges that almost no one dares to face. It wasn't the world that became more distant. It was you who became more whole. Carl Jung said that the greatest human fear is not loneliness, but the real encounter with oneself. And that is exactly what happens when certain bonds lose their emotional function. They fall apart because they no longer support who you have become. The longing disappears because the dependence disappears along with it. Loneliness ceases to be punishment and becomes space, and relationships begin to reveal something important. Some existed to shape you, not to accompany you to the end. When you understand this, guilt diminishes, estrangement dissolves, and clarity remains. It's not about rejecting people, it's about respecting your own psychological process. Sometimes ceasing to miss someone isn't a sign of coldness, but of emotional maturity, and the reflection that remains is simple yet profound. Perhaps the greatest sign of growth isn't who stays in your life, but who no longer needs to stay for you to feel complete. And this is where this video ends. Not with an absolute answer, but with a mirror. If you've stopped missing certain people, perhaps it's not an absence of feeling. Perhaps it's the presence of yourself. Not every separation is a loss. Not every longing that disappears is a void. Sometimes it's just the mind silently telling you that you've changed, that some bonds have fulfilled their purpose, that certain versions of yourself are in the past. And understanding this doesn't make you cold. It makes you aware. Because growing up in the end isn't about learning to hold on to people. It's about learning not to get lost trying to hold on to them. If this video made you think of someone or a phase of your life, leave that in the comments. Your experience can help more people than you imagine. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share with anyone who is questioning their own relationships. And to continue delving deeper into these themes of human behavior, loneliness, and internal changes, watch the videos in the cards. They continue this reflection and further expand on everything that has been discussed here.